I'm very excited to introduce Diana Birsan and Steve Scott to discuss the role that Jamf has had in helping them succeed with Mac and iOS at Shopify. Diana, Steve?
Hello. It's very bright up here. How's everyone? That clap earlier was not good enough. We're going to wake you up because we're exciting people. So first, we're going to introduce our session, which is, the clicker doesn't work. Okay. It's managing devices in an open culture. So basically, this is our story. This is our story, how we use Casper, how certain things maybe we developed ourselves that helped us better in our environment, and managing devices, it's great. So I'm Diana. I'm an IT lead in Toronto, Canada, and I lead teams in 3 offices in Canada, and we do device management, we do accounts, hardware, buying everything, with jacks of all trades, and we are all Casper admins as well. I'm teaching a larger team now. And this is my 3rd year at JNUC, and my 1st year presenting.
And my name's Steven Scott. I'm a security DevOps engineer at Shopify, obviously. I sort of write code to try and answer security questions and respond to security problems that we have at the company. The security team works a lot on trust, which comes up as part of this talk, and it's why I got involved with Casper. This is my 1st year at JNUC, and I'm really excited to be here in the beautiful city of Minneapolis. So thank you.
First time ever presenting.
Yes,
ever.
Also presenting.
Yeah.
So very exciting. So what is Shopify? Shopify is an e-commerce company. Our mission statement is to make commerce better for everyone. And we're trying to do that by empowering merchants right now. Empowering merchants by providing them a way to easily set up stores online. Just before 2006, our founders were working on a snowboard shop to sell snowboards online, and they found that it was really difficult to create an online store that would meet their needs. Things like setting up payments. If anyone's tried to set up a payment gateway with Visa or something like that, they need to have a lot of upfront capital. And so they realized that the problems that they were solving in terms of creating the shop were actually bigger problems than just creating snowboards, and so they turned that into a company called Shopify.
And I figured I'd show you some photos from some of our offices. This is our faux sauna in our Ottawa office. It's actually just a meeting room, but it was a really cool design. This is our CEO's office. You can see all the snowboards. Really cool design.
Some history, company history.
Yeah. This is our Waterloo office. It's actually a distillery. It's Seagram's distillery that we leased and are using for our office. It's a very interesting space. This is our Toronto office where I work. Modern design, clean lines, all that kind of cool stuff. And this is our Montreal office. So what's the agenda here? I think the most important part that we really want to cover is why we're doing this presentation, our key values at Shopify in terms of culture. So why they're important, what they even have to do with all this, and why we even had the initial problem. So the next thing is the initial problem. What were we trying to solve at Shopify? What was the reason we even needed management? And also the conflicts that arose from it. So why were there even issues to begin with? Then we're going to go into business solutions that really didn't work for us. Some things that we sort of thought of and rejected immediately. And then we will go into technical solutions that did work for us, and a final outcome and all the impact that it had on our organization.
Okay, so why are we talking about culture? And in particular, why are we talking about culture at Shopify? Well, we work at Shopify, so we know the culture, we understand the culture. But every company, every organization has a particular kind of internal culture, and depending on that culture, they can create problems with rolling out technical solutions. So, Casper is a technical product, or Jamf now, sorry. And it's a solution to a technical problem, but all of the issues that we had in terms of rolling it out had to do with our company culture, and a lot of this presentation is about how we interface that and work with that. The best solution is usually one with the right technical and right cultural fit. That's where we found our best successes, and so that's why we're here to talk to you today about culture.
So I like memes, so I used this meme, but it has some good meaning behind it. What I mean by this is an organization starts with a culture. You don't build a culture for an organization. You have values that you care about when you build a small startup and you grow and you maintain those values, because they could get destroyed. Our key values, which we'll be discussing very shortly, are things that we try to maintain, and we try to enhance them so that no matter how far we grow, how big we get, we still care about those key values no matter what changes. And here's some of the values that we'll be covering. We're not covering all of them, just the really important ones that have to do with managing something like Casper in our environment.
And note that nowhere here is like access to ping pong tables. You know, perks aren't culture, right?
Yeah.
Like culture is the things that people do when no one's looking.
Yeah. So the first one I want to talk about is our do things, tell people. This is a poster that we have in our office. What I mean by that is the growth mentality. Shopify was a very small startup, and we grew based on very hardworking people. We had a very small team for very many years, and slowly but surely, I mean, we're growing like crazy. And I think that we really care about improving with practice and perseverance and effort. And we have a lot of perks in the company that obviously benefit us for this. We have hack days, we do that quarterly. We also have professional development budgets like coming to conferences and presenting and just exposure, right? And what this all means is being able to share that knowledge with everybody else, regardless of if they're in your department or not. It's the do things, tell people so that everybody gets better at everything.
So if you're going to tell somebody something and you're trying to be careful about what you're telling them, that would come out of a lack of trust, right? You're like, well, I don't want to share this idea with this guy because maybe he's going to run with it and then steal my idea or whatever. So it's really important that if you're sharing ideas that you have a good, solid, charged trust battery. So the trust battery is this mental model that we use. It's a way of thinking about trust. And Tobias Lutke, I think, summed it up best. He's our CEO. He said it's charged to 50% when people are first hired. And then every time you work with someone at the company, the trust battery between the two of you is either charged or discharged, based on things like whether you deliver on what you promise. This can also be between merchants, like our customers, and stakeholders in our company. And in the security team, like I mentioned earlier, we think a lot about trust. And our job, in many ways, is to ensure that there's good trust both between the company and third parties, and also between different teams within Shopify. So that if the IT team is starting to impact negatively the charge on the trust battery with another team, then it's our job in a little bit to step in and try and do something good there.
The next one I want to talk about is default to open. This is a really big one for us as well. What I mean by default to open is defaulting to open internally, being transparent, no matter the department, no matter who you're talking about, and building trust through that openness. So things like we hold AMAs all the time, Ask Me Anythings, with our executive team. So people ask a bunch of questions. We live stream it to every office, and it could be anything. It doesn't even matter. It can be even anonymous. And we get really great answers, and we sort of get some more insight on like where we're going, what we're doing. And I think this is really important. It just really makes us feel like we're part of a bigger picture. We're part of making commerce better for everyone.
And it engenders a culture where people from different teams are able to comment on what the other teams are doing. It's sort of delineating and spreading out the kind of responsibility for everything at the company.
Yeah. Now, although I mean default to open internally, we do default to secrecy externally, obviously. We really care a lot about keeping Shopify data private, obviously. The next one I want to talk about is our thriving on change. So I think our CEO is pretty crazy about this. He loves making people uncomfortable, but he likes making them uncomfortable because he wants them to be comfortable. And he embraces change. And the whole thing about our company, as it's been changing over several years, is we like people to fail, to take risks, and we encourage it because it's what keeps us hardworking. It's what keeps us learning. It does everything that we need it to do. And people enjoy that. They feel part of the whole business, right? And that aspect of it in terms of this presentation, we value people's feedback. And I think that's really why we're talking about thriving on change, because it's a change not only for the rest of the company, but also for our IT department.
So how does this interface with how our employees treat their devices, treat their laptops? At Shopify, we don't really have that many desktops, so laptops is sort of a catch-all for devices, computers people have. We tell people to treat it like their own. We want people to feel free to use the device how they see fit, and we don't want to set up any kind of policy of monitoring anything. We want to ensure that employees feel trusted to do what they want to do, again, keeping that trust battery as high as we can. This comes down to treating people like adults and allowing them to be responsible both for the software on the machines and the configuration of their machines. That was the sort of historic approach to the problem of device management.
And I got some people to send me some lovely photos of their machines from my office. They all know how much stickers are the bane of my existence because we do upgrades like crazy. But now I just make them all take their stickers off, and I watch them cry as they, do it. But now we provide these really awesome covers for the laptops as well, so people are much happier that they can just take it and use it. So just some really cool artsy stuff. So what was our initial problem? Let's get into that. Well, we need to manage a bunch of machines because we're doubling every year. And although that may not last forever, it's such fast growth. And when I started about a year ago, it was managing spreadsheets for serial numbers. It was managing some managed databases, and I just was so mad coming from an environment where I did have Casper.
Right, so this is like a pre-Casper stage. There's no management, there's no nothing installed on devices, so that we can configure anything.
I got a machine in onboarding, and it was sealed in a box, and I'm like, okay, well, this is not DP, this is not anything. Okay, let's do this. And so that was the initial problem, obviously. And then we started thinking about licensing, software licensing. We started thinking about, well, how can I even tell if machines are encrypted? Like they're the key to the kingdom, basically. We want them to be secure because that is the way into Shopify. So there was no way of managing this, there was no way of telling, and there was no complete solution, obviously. And well, everyone is on Macs, it's a Mac-only environment. We wanted to leverage VPP, we wanted to leverage DEP, MDM profiles for configurations, all that kind of stuff, and we couldn't. And that's when we thought of the solution, which was, well, we'll deploy Casper, obviously. We're pretty confident about this. Yay! And I was pretty confident because I had used it before for many years, and it met our technical needs, obviously. Like I said, it had DEP, it had VPP, pretty easy to enroll anybody, and you can offer so much with it. You can license software very easily. I've set up requester buttons so that people can request all types of software. Yeah, it's fantastic, it's so good. And so then we got CEO endorsement. We were torn between two products. Obviously, we chose Casper because it's based on Mac, and I think that that was... There was no other option. It's fine. So our culture team got into it. We started talking to them about how we're going to send this message across. We wanted help on wording because we're IT people, and we'll just be like, here you go. Okay, bye. So they helped us with that. We wrote this really nice enrollment invitation email, sent it out to everybody. And I even wrote internal documentation because obviously it's a new thing, could explain to them a little bit, sort of tried to compare the culture of Jamf to our culture to say they really care about their own culture and we can relate. So, this happened mid-December last year and things were going well and that is my face when it, skyrocketing enrollments. I think 50% of the company got enrolled in the first couple weeks. And then it started to taper off, and then that was my face. And I didn't understand why. I mean, maybe it was Christmas vacation or something. If people have that, I guess they have that. And I sort of let it go for a while, but after months, it was just still tapering slowly upwards. Then I was just like, why though?
Right, because why? We had the perfect solution. We pushed it out to our company. It's so elegant, it's so refined, it's so simple. Why? Why are you not doing this? So, why are you guys not installing this? So, it comes down, again, to that whole issue of laptop ownership, right? When you tell people that they're the admins of their own machines, they become the admins of their own machines, turns out. Real surprise. And then when you say, hey, we're going to be the admins of your machines, they're like, but hey, and then they have their own why though moment, right? It's like, don't you trust us to do this? You hired us. We're intelligent people. We're very technical. We're savvy. We get it. We need to encrypt our hard drives. It's okay. Just tell us what to do, and we'll follow those steps. You don't need to install this thing that has all these permissions, and we don't know what the actions are it's taking. We don't know what scripts it's running. We don't know what policies are set up. So this came to a point where we're really, for a lot of people, we're violating this culture of trust, right? We're violating this thing that we had established and told them was the way that we wanted to run things, which was to hand off responsibility for things like this to them. And so when you take a step back from that, it drains the trust battery. And people are like, whoa. So I'm not trusted to do this action on my own computer? So there is more to it than just culture. where there are some very hard pieces, HR data, financial data, SSH keys. Now, I mean, most people in this room are like, hey, like Casper's not allocating that and like dragging it down. But the problem with Casper, in a way, and I guess it's called Jamf now. We rehearsed this a lot with calling it Casper, so that was a little discombobulating. But the problem with Casper as a solution, for our case, is that it's a real black box, right? A user just doesn't understand what's going on their computer. They just have this agent that has root privileges. It can pretty much do what it wants, and they don't have a really good way of validating and checking whether or not it's doing things that they feel comfortable with, or collecting data that they feel comfortable with. For all we know, they know we were collecting DNS logs, and that could be whether they're at work or at home, and we were encouraging them to use it like their device. So, how do you deal with this kind of trust problem? You allow people to trust but verify, right? So you say, well, you should be able to trust your IT department. They say, sure. And right now, they know who that is, right? That's Diana, that's some other people, some of whom are in this room. And in the future, though, that might be a different set of people. And so what you want to do is you want to set up a situation where they go, well, it doesn't really matter who's working there. We know that they have a good process in line to verify that Casper is doing the things that we feel comfortable with. And that comes back to questions about like the permissions that Casper is given in terms of read versus write access to everything, and as well as what is it bringing down. So based on our culture then, you can start to ask yourself the question, like, what would our approach be to these kinds of concerns, to these kinds of confusions about how we're using it? And we go back to this idea of strong opinions weakly held. At Shopify, we like to embrace people having good, vigorous conversation, but be amenable to change if reasonable argument comes up. And I know that we're talking a lot about Shopify culture here. Okay, I get that. And I get that maybe some of you are thinking, well, you know, that's not how our office works. There's this bit of politics or that bit of politics, and I totally understand that. I mean, the important bit here is that if the Casper solution is one that's working for you right out of the box, then no problem. But if you're seeing enrollment issues, it might be time to start thinking about what the company culture is and how you can make it fit better. And for us, that meant that we should be valuing the ideas of people in other departments, other teams, and trying to trust our employees more, demonstrate that trust, and encourage ownership by allowing a conversation to flow in a natural way. So we tried to listen to everyone, we tried to be flexible, and in doing so, we were trying to empower people as much as possible to have some kind of impact on the solution. And so we decided that we should probably take some kind of an action to encourage enrollment, and we had a set of business solutions that we started looking at.
So I know, like, these sound ridiculous probably now, having seen the previous slides going, well, yeah, clearly these aren't going to work. Well, I'm going to go through it anyways, and you can all just listen. So our final group, basically after, I'm going to say 6 months, was relatively small. I'm going to say 10% of the company. But, I mean, it was still a group of people that did not have enrollments. We still had their serial numbers in a spreadsheet somewhere. So could we ignore the problem? Well, no, not really. It's still a security vulnerability. Some of those people may not have their disks encrypted. They could be running God knows what operating system version. So that wasn't going to fly for us. And then we started thinking, well, why don't we make them do it? I mean, obviously, at my previous company, that's what we did. I mean, there were machines there were desktops. We use laptops, but they were desktops, so it was easy to enroll them. We had SSL access. We could just deploy the quick add and be done with it. But why would that work for us after I went through all those culture values that we really care about? Well, they wouldn't. We would make enemies. People would start feeling like they couldn't open up to us. They couldn't raise concerns. And at that point, we would deploy it, force them to do it, get them enrolled, and they would remove framework. And then we would see that they're not checking in anymore. And then we would have to go back and bother them again. It's costly. We don't have that large of a team. And it's just not a permanent solution. Obviously, that's not going to fly.
And as some of you may have experienced, it starts like a sort of an adversarial back and forth, right, where you're trying to like trick people into doing things, and they're like, no, and they just uninstall it quietly while they're at home or something like that. They come in the next day, and you're like, why isn't this guy checking in? And you realize that they're just, you know, they just keep doing it. So it's not a permanent fix.
No. And you know what? At first, I was curious about it. I think the first time I ever heard about it was I was noticing this after maybe a month. Some machines weren't checking in, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just removed it. Didn't really like it." Okay, and I'm like, "Oh, carry on." There was nothing I could say at that point because I did not understand how to even deal with that. I did not want to make an enemy. And I was 3 months new at the company. I'm like, okay, I'll just think about this. And then obviously the final point was, well, why don't you just trust us? Like, trust IT. We know, we picked the solution. We spent months researching what we wanted to do. And, like, why wouldn't you just listen to what we have to say? Well, that once again goes against our decision to value all opinions and to default to open so that people understand what we're even doing. And really, all three of these wouldn't work in an environment that has a go-kart room. I mean, like, I know this is a ridiculous image, but it actually is in our Ottawa office. That is our COO on a hoverboard. That is the mayor of Ottawa and the British Commissioner of Canada on go-karts. Like, this is not the kind of place where you force people to do things. They just like to have fun, and they do a really great job at their, all their work, right? So then we thought, okay, some technical solutions. Sorry, I did not update this, clearly. Why don't we use the Casper Suite? Why don't we use Jamf? We have lots of tools there available for us. Why don't I build some stuff that maybe could help our environment and maybe could give the people the transparency that they need? So the first thing I did was I wanted to make the logs available for anybody to see easily without going to console, var log, all that stuff. So all I'm doing here is I made a folder and I parsed it. I parsed the log and picked some really nice, lovely words like installing, upgrading, all that kind of jazz. And I put it in a text file within that folder. Then I created a policy that runs on reoccurring check-in, and it constantly updates that file so that people could see it. Created a plugin directly in Casper. Created a cute little log thing, courtesy of Andrina. Great idea. And then I made it open the file from the folder that I created. And voila, like, all the logs are available for you to see. It's updating existing plugins. It's showing you what policies are running at any moment of any time on reoccurring check-in. So, okay, well, this is pretty clear. Like, I'm thinking in my head when I wrote this, why is this not good enough? And then I start to sit down and think about why this isn't good enough. And really, we have policy names, we have certain things, but there's no detail behind that. There's no verification there. There's trusting that that policy is named the right thing, trusting that it's not been changed, trusting that whatever it's doing, whatever it's labeled as, is exactly what it's doing. No, there's no way to tell that. We also noticed screen sharing was kind of interesting. If you used remote, you could see somebody requesting access to view your screen, and you could see the log pretty clearly. But if you...
There'd be like a little pop-up when someone would go and try and screen share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then, when you wanted to log in as Casper screen sharing, the log wouldn't be very clear. So people would not even know that somebody else is logged into their machine in a different login, doing whatever. Just, it wasn't, once again, good enough for our culture.
Which was really too bad, because it was exactly the kind of thing that we needed, but it avoided a solution for exactly one of the principal concerns that people had, which is people were like, but you can just watch our screens at any time,
you can see over my shoulder.
And it's like, that's exactly the thing they could not check.
Yeah, no good. So basically, we were asking people to trust us, but not verify what we're doing. And that, obviously, once again, is a concern. So then I thought, okay, obviously we're going to try auditor access. We have one account. We don't have AD in our environment, so that's another interesting, fun thing that I'm not used to. So I thought, okay, I'll make an auditor account, make it available in our SSO, and anybody can log in and see policies, scripts, configurations, anything, really, right? And although this was changed, at the time, we could not allow everybody to view policies, scripts, and everything without allowing read access to all computers at the time. In the new version of Jamf, it is actually changed. It's been updated, so it is possible. But there's still the issue of the fact that we did not want everybody to see everybody else's machines. And I know this sounds ridiculous, probably, because you're like, but you just said default to open. But I think of it as the example of going to my doctor and going, I need my medical records. I need to see when I had my shots of whatever. Vodka. Yeah. And they give me a binder of all these, or they give me like a laptop, and they're like, okay, just search your name. Yeah. And you could just find everybody.
Everyone's shots of vodka is there.
All the shots
All
of
the
vodka.
shots of vodka everyone's ever
Drinks
ever
for everyone.
taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I sort of compare it to that, where it's like, but that's not what I really want. And people in our environment don't want that. They just want to see what we see for their machine. That's all they care about, right? So this wasn't going to fly either.
And it's like, you can say, okay, well, hey, this is like pretty innocuous data. Like, we're talking about like battery levels, right? Like, why does that matter? And that's fine for now. But if in the future you actually did want to track something that people, for whatever reason, because there's a lot of different kinds of people and kinds of concerns involved here. And you don't want to make a decision that sticks you into a certain position that's inflexible. You want to be more agile going forward as much as you can, right? Be able to pivot. And so if someone does come and say, hey, we'd like to track this, but we can't just show that to everybody, if you give them auditor access in this way, you don't have a move to make at this time.
Yeah. So what now? What now, Stephen?
Right.
This was me. I was so sad. I was just sitting there, all upset, because I ran out of solutions. I'm part of the IT department. I knew Casper. I knew some scripting, obviously. I'm not a dev.
Right.
So what now?
So I like to think of Diana as being Keanu Reeves in this picture, and then I'm the sandwich. And she's sort of talking to me. I think that's what's going on. No, she's eating me. Never mind. So, sorry.
It's fine.
So you go back and you go, well, what do we really need? Like, what does the user need access to, right? Well, what they really want to know is what is Casper doing, right? That's the bottom line question. What's it doing? What's it tracking? Because if I actually have data about that, then I don't have to have all kinds of worries about what actions it's taking. We have a very technical community at Shopify, and so if we show them the script content, they'll be able to see what it does, for the most part. If we show them policy configurations, they'll get the gist of it. If we show the data that's collected about their devices and their computers, then they'll understand what that means and be able to take those individual pieces back to us and say, hey, that's the thing I'm worried about, right? This line in this bash script, that's the thing I'm concerned. So that would be great, right? If we had some way of getting that out of the system. Oh, JAMP API. So JAMP API, as many of you know, is a way of pulling this kind of data out. If you're not familiar, there's a great talk about it. I think it's happening right now, so you should probably leave. But yeah, no, please. I've been really looking forward to this talk. It's a RESTful API, and it's a way to pull down JSON descriptions of your policies, your scripts, including the lines that are included in your scripts, as well as the computer and device data that's tracked. So it's exactly access to the kind of information that our concerned citizens would have wanted access to. And it has wonderful documentation that you can just browse through and try out different gets and posts and so on. And I happen to know Ruby on Rails, being a dev. Now, at the time that I wrote this, I didn't actually have a lot of Ruby on Rails experience. So I want to emphasize here that the barrier to entry is pretty low. So I'm not telling everyone in this room, well, if you want to solve this problem, you need to become a software developer. Not at all. But some rudimentary Ruby on Rails framework understanding is required for this particular solution. So Ruby on Rails is a web development framework. It's written in a coding language called Ruby, and it's known by a lot of people at Shopify. So the reason I chose this was more that it was easily auditable by anybody else at the company. So if someone was like, hey, you say you're showing me all your scripts, but I don't have a way of understanding this code to demonstrate to myself that that's happening, using this solution made it accessible to a lot of people at the company. But then the question was, okay, well, I don't want to spend a month writing a handler for the API so that I can communicate with it and pull all the data down. So, how do I API, though? And so I do what I normally do when I'm not sure what to do, which is I Google the Google. And I search it. And then I try and look for a GitHub repo that might have a gem, which is the word for library in Ruby world. And then I get kind of confused, because normally it's not obvious from a documentation what a gem does. But in this case, it was. And it was a gem from Pixar, which is, of course, the famous lamp manufacturer. So Pixar Animation Studios, which is a weird name for a lamp manufacturer, and this guy, Chris Lascelles, who works there, have this Ruby JSS library gem that is exactly the interface for the JAMP API that we were looking for. And he has a talk today at 4 p.m. About alleviating the apprehension of coding in Ruby. So if you have Ruby questions, feel free to go to that, or you can talk to me afterwards. But I just thought this was a pretty cool highlight to make, which is that the real glue to my solution and to what we were working on was something that came out of the community. And this is, after all, a community conference, right? So yeah, anyways, very cool guy, very, very helpful. Really nice that we found that. So okay, so we have Ruby on Rails, we've got the Jamf API, we've got Ruby JSS, the gem that ties those two pieces together, and out of that, we get what I call the friendly ghost. So when I was a kid, Casper was the friendly ghost, right? It was this thing that people were kind of like had some trepidation about at first because it's a ghost, but then like once you got to know it, it was this friendly little guy, and like he hung out with your, anyways. Now, Casper's a piece of software, and we actually had a bunch of people using the name of Ghostbusters for the people who had concerns about this. They sort of gave themselves that moniker. Pretty funny. But you wouldn't want to shove the friendly ghost in a netcode containment unit, so, you know, not bad. So that was the name.
It's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So this was to try and give people some sense of trust. So what is it? As I mentioned, or you could have derived, it's a Ruby on Rails application. It's presenting Casper policy script code and collected computer data on a per-user basis, and it pulls live data from the API to do this using the Ruby JSS gem from Pixar, and the source is available to Shopify employees via GitHub. I should mention, by the way, also that that gem was open source. So the GitHub thing is important because it allows internals to actually audit that code. So here's a good example of a page. This is the About page. I won't spend too much time here. It's basically a quick description. Scripts. So the important thing here is that you can see that we're actually showing the bash code. So anyone who is familiar with bash or the command line can look at this, or they can go and ask a colleague about this. And there's no questions here about what it does, right? They can reference a technical person. So it's self-auditable in this way. And notice I haven't written a brief description of it anywhere. I'm just raw outputting the content. So I never need to update this page. It updates automatically when the Jamf configuration is changed. And then that same tendency is brought over into the policies page, which literally just lists them in a table. It's very simple stuff in terms of presentation layer, which was just perfect because, again, we have a fairly technically competent base. There's the Apple configurator details. OK, and then on the My Computers area, which is probably a terrible name for something that's for Apple,
You didn't think
just
that's
realized,
very
I just realized that. No, that's terrible.
Yeah, but you also said My Devices.
Yeah, My Devices. I
terrible.
should have had
That's
just like
all
an
I
Apple
wrote.
symbol or
Yeah.
something. Anyway, so you can see there all of my computer details, including my MAC address. So if you want to come to the office and spoof me, there you go. But more importantly, it's on an individual basis. So I'm using Google OAuth to tie an email address back to an individual user. For us, that was a good primary key. Oftentimes, usernames in the Jamf API are used as the primary keys.
And we use that as well to recon it back in. As I was saying earlier, we don't have AD in our environment. It was really manual at first, but by creating this solution, we are able to recon the full name and the email and eventually some other information back into every single computer record so that we have actual databases that make sense in our environment. So.
And so this is giving us that kind of granularity of data that we were looking for. So if we ever start grabbing things that people are concerned with sharing with other people, then it will be on a page that's just for them.
Yep.
So that's a good answer to the question of what's Casper doing. But what if you just don't want Casper to do some of the things it can do? Right? You just feel uncomfortable. You're like, well, I could go check out the friendly ghost to see what it's doing. But at any given minute, that could change, and you could still just run those scripts that I don't like. So what if I want to make it so it only has read-only access?
Yeah. So we have a lot of users still that weren't enrolled, and although we gave them a solution that can be viewed pretty easily, they can figure out what we're running, they still weren't happy. They still didn't want something to live on their machine in their pristine, beautiful, creations. And you know what? At a certain point, we just had to accept this. I mean, they're valid concerns. The trust certificate for Casper was pretty broad, and there was a lot of security people, or production engineers mostly, that were like, well, no, why? Why though? And we still had all those kinds of concerns, and these Ghostbusters, they grouped together, became one unit, and still fought against us. And that, I mean, at that point, once again, I'm not going to use business solutions to solve this. I'm thinking of a way to use Casper in a read-only environment where I can still get my data, I can still get inventory, and I can still check if they're encrypted, and making sure that all those kinds of things are happening. It's
like a self-auditing mechanism.
Exactly,
that they can just sort of opt into on a timeline that's reasonable for us.
Exactly. So we had to accept the lack of control. We did not have an admin account, a management account on the machine. We had no MDM. We had nothing. We agreed with the engineers that they would manage their own security, but they did have to enroll in this way at least. But they could take care of all the security needs and keep their machines up to date and all that kind
Which,
of stuff.
if you rewind like 40 slides, that was the original setup. We just didn't have a way of checking what they were doing.
Exactly. So we created Ecto Containment Unit, once again, based on Casper Suite, not Jamf. Got to change that name.
Yeah,
or
well, okay, so
whatever.
the idea here was like, what if it's not a friendly ghost? Then you do want to shove it in the Ecto Containment Unit.
Then
so,
we would.
Yeah, suck it in.
Yeah. So it was created by Damien Giroux. He is infrastructure security lead, this guy's boss, at Shopify.
Very wonderful man.
Yeah.
Really great human
Where's
being.
the camera?
Through and through.
Stare at the camera.
Don't just say that publicly, boss.
So you can find him on GitHub at Mute Mule. And what he did was he used sandbox exec, which is a wrapper command in macOS, and basically granularly went through every single action that the quick add has and decided to allow or deny it access, and created this wrapper installer script for the binary that would limit its actions just to reading, to sending an inventory update to us. And not only this, there was a lot of users that, like I said at the beginning, would enroll in Casper, and then a month later were like, I'm just gonna install it. Well, that management account is still on there. Doing a remove framework doesn't remove the management account, because I'm sure in a lot of your environments, that management account is an account you always had on that machine, and you have now chosen to use it as your management account in the JSS. But for our environment, we never did, and we needed to get rid of it altogether. So he also created an uninstall script to remove it as well before running Ecto Containment Unit, so that it's available, completely clean of any root account that they don't know about.
And this is a really cool option for people who are planning on keeping the laptops after, say, in the event that they leave the company, because then they can remove access from the IT staff at the company, from the computer that that company no longer owns.
So what we did in the IT department was we created a smart group just to have all these people in one place, so I knew I did not have to worry about them. And they still update once a day. We have an inventory update. And we actually just made it open source this morning. You can feel free to check out the GitHub repo here, Shopify/ecto_containment_unit. To give it a go. Like maybe it's something that would interest you guys. I'm not sure about the type of culture in your environments, but it was really beneficial to us to get that last 30 people enrolled and have 100% compliance. Like I couldn't actually believe it. Like we ended up with 100% enrollment in one way or another. And you know what? The only caveat to this was that the people who needed licensing would still have to go through Casper, but we agreed with them that they would re-enroll the full way and they would get the licensing. I would have it in my licensing inventory. Everything would be hunky-dory, and then they would uninstall and get back into Ecto. And we made an agreement. That's fine. It works for us, and you know what? It makes my life easier. I don't have to worry about their problems.
So to make it as prescriptive as possible, if you have users who do not want to install Casper for all time, and you trust them to manage their own computers, they can run this at whatever interval you decide is acceptable, and then you'll be able to check that they're following the policies that you want them to.
Yeah. And if not, we were just like, well, too bad, you get full Casper again.
Yeah.
Now you can shut up. So okay, let's talk about the impact. Well, there's a couple things. I think the big one, the one I really care about, and the reason why I'm here, was that I want to talk about how culture was maintained. I think that a lot of things could have gone wrong if we chose to do some of those business solutions. I think that we cared about people's opinions, and now they know that we cared about their opinions, so they're going to continue to voice their opinions, and that's really important to us because now we have a useful group to test on forever till the end of time.
And that comes down to enhancing trust and ensuring that these relationships are positive relationships, positive working relationships. People can share, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with the thing that you're doing. It doesn't have to be Casper, it could be anything at the company, right? And a lot of the problems at companies come from a lack of communication. So we were really trying to engender a good sense of trust and safety for people to say, I have a concern about this thing, even if it's not in their core area. If it affects them, it's important that they're able to speak up about it. At least to me, I mean, I think most people would agree that there's moments in their career where they feel like they couldn't have spoken out against something that they disagree with strongly, but that does impact them. So we ensured that people who had that concern were able to feel trusted and get some results. And then also, like, it was cool to contribute to the community. Again, I'm really proud that something I made some PRs against, a repo I made some PRs against, is going into the newest version of the desk lamp company. Yeah, Pixar. Come on, it's a joke.
He's trying. It's okay. Just give him.
We were just looking for an image that wouldn't infringe copyright, and I just went with it, maybe too far. So sorry about that.
So another really great thing that this did was it created a platform for us. So what I was saying about it earlier, where we don't have AD, now there's an easy way for us to enable that friendly ghost for all our remote employees. So at our company, when people onboard, which we do bi-weekly, we have people who onboard in one of our offices, as well as people on our remote staff, our support team, that log in through whatever app we use, and they manage their machines with some instructions that we give them, right? So DEP is used for machines in the office, but for all the remote people, we drop ship laptops. They don't arrive in time. We can't get them in DEP fast enough, and then they're missing, and then we can't, put in all their information. So this created a really easy way where at least we can recon some of the information in there to identify each machine. And I think that was really important. I think we can grow from there. If I can just harass you a little bit more to put some more little things in there, that'd be great. And lastly, I think this just obviously sent a positive internal message. Sort of ties into the whole culture thing, right? Like we cared what people had to say, and it maintained trust, it maintained openness. People can still come to us with all their lovely concerns, and we can try to help. And yeah, I think that's the really big thing we wanted to get across to you guys. And I hope we did that.
Yeah. Again, it's not about our particular culture. It's just about thinking about if your company culture does conflict with something about the rollout of Casper, that might be impacting your enrollment, and maybe there's some steps you can take. And I think hopefully we've supplied you with some tools and some ideas on how you might do that. For Friendly Ghost, if anyone's interested in an open source version of that, please let me know. Or if they're having trouble setting up containment unit or any of the tools, feel free to give me a shout.
So yeah, with that, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Thank you.